As I stood at the altar, surrounded by friends and family, I felt a storm brewing inside me. The laughter and joy of the day felt like a cruel joke, a facade hiding the truth I had uncovered just days before. My heart raced as I glanced at her, radiant in white, blissfully unaware of the chaos I was about to unleash. The venue was breathtaking, a sprawling estate nestled in the hills, adorned with flowers that seemed to bloom just for this occasion. The sun cast a golden hue over everything, illuminating the faces of our guests, who were all smiles and laughter. My best man, Jake, stood beside me, his grin wide and infectious, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The way he looked at her, the way she laughed a little too freely at his jokes, it gnawed at me, a persistent itch I couldn't scratch. I had always envisioned this day as the pinnacle of my life, a celebration of love and commitment. But now, as I adjusted my tie and felt the weight of the ring in my pocket, I couldn't help but feel a sense of dread. The vows we were about to exchange felt like a lie, a performance for an audience that had no idea of the betrayal lurking just beneath the surface. My bride, Emily, was stunning. Her dress hugged her curves perfectly, and her hair cascaded down her back in soft waves. She looked every bit the fairy tale princess I had dreamed of marrying. But as I watched her, I felt a pang of sadness mixed with anger. How could she stand there, looking so perfect, when I knew the truth? The truth that had shattered my world just days before. The ceremony began, and I forced myself to focus on the officiant's words. He spoke of love, trust, and fidelity, and I felt a bitter laugh bubble up inside me. How could I promise to love and cherish her when I knew she had betrayed me? I glanced at Jake, who was standing there with an air of confidence, completely oblivious to the turmoil raging within me. I had trusted him with my life, my secrets, and now I felt like a fool. As the officiant continued, I couldn't help but replay the events of the past week in my mind. It had started innocently enough, a late-night text from an unknown number, a message that sent my heart racing with suspicion. I had brushed it off at first, thinking it was just a prank or a wrong number. But then I noticed the way Emily had been acting, her late nights at work, the sudden need for space, and the way she would flinch when I touched her. The pieces began to fall into place, and I found myself spiraling down a rabbit hole of doubt and fear. I had confronted her, and she had denied everything, her eyes wide with feigned innocence. But I had seen the truth in her eyes, the flicker of guilt that betrayed her. And then there was Jake, who had been acting strangely, too. The way he had been overly supportive of Emily, always offering to help her with wedding plans, made my skin crawl. As I stood there, I felt the weight of the ring in my pocket, a symbol of my commitment to a woman who had shattered my trust. I had planned to slip it onto her finger, to seal our vows with a promise of forever. But now, I felt like a puppet on a string, forced to play a role in a charade that was about to come crashing down. The officiant's voice faded into the background as I lost myself in thought. I could feel the eyes of our guests on me, their smiles and laughter a stark contrast to the turmoil inside. I wanted to scream, to shout the truth from the rooftops, but I held back, knowing that the moment would come. I just had to wait for the right time. As Emily turned to me, her eyes sparkling with joy, I felt a surge of anger mixed with heartbreak. How could she look at me like that, knowing what she had done? I forced a smile, but inside, I was a tempest, ready to unleash my fury. The calm before the storm was almost unbearable, and I knew that soon, everything would change. The vows were next, and as I prepared to speak, I felt a rush of adrenaline. I had a plan, a way to expose the truth and reclaim my dignity. I would not let her walk down that aisle without facing the consequences of her actions. The wedding day, meant to be a celebration of love, would instead become a battleground for my heart. As I took a deep breath, I glanced at Jake one last time. The man I had called my brother, my confidant, was about to become my greatest adversary. The storm was brewing, and I was ready to unleash it. The days leading up to the wedding had been a whirlwind of excitement and anxiety. I had poured my heart and soul into planning this day, envisioning every detail from the flowers to the music. Emily and I had been together for 5 years, and I thought I knew her better than anyone. We had built a life together, filled with laughter, shared dreams, and countless memories. But now, as I stood on the precipice of what should have been the happiest day of my life, I couldn't shake the feeling that everything was about to unravel. Emily and I met in college, two starry-eyed kids who fell in love over late-night study sessions and shared pizza. She was the light in my life, the one who made everything feel possible. I remember the first time I saw her, her laughter ringing like music in the air, her eyes sparkling with mischief. We were inseparable, and I had always believed that our love was unbreakable. But as I looked at her now, I felt a chasm opening between us, a void filled with doubt and betrayal. Jake had been my best friend since childhood. We had grown up together, sharing everything from toys to secrets. He was the brother I never had, always there to support me through thick and thin. When I introduced him to Emily, I thought I was bringing two of the most important people in my life together. They hit it off immediately, their chemistry undeniable. I had always felt secure in their friendship, believing that they would never cross a line. But now, I was left questioning everything. In the weeks leading up to the wedding, I had noticed subtle changes in Emily's behavior. She had become distant, her laughter less frequent, her smiles more forced. I chalked it up to wedding stress, the pressure of planning a perfect day weighing heavily on her. But deep down, I felt a nagging suspicion that something was amiss. I had tried to talk to her about it, but she brushed me off, insisting that everything was fine. I wanted to believe her, but the seeds of doubt had already been planted. The night I discovered the truth was etched into my memory like a scar. I had come home early from work, eager to surprise Emily with dinner. As I entered our apartment, I noticed her phone buzzing on the kitchen counter. Curiosity got the better of me, and I picked it up, glancing at the screen. My heart sank as I saw a message from an unknown number, a message that read, "Can't wait to see you tonight. I miss you." I felt like I had been punched in the gut. My hands trembled as I set the phone down, my mind racing. I had to confront her, but fear gripped me. What if I was wrong? What if it was just a harmless conversation? But deep down, I knew. I could feel the truth clawing at me, demanding to be acknowledged. When Emily came home, I confronted her. I could see the panic in her eyes as I recounted what I had seen. She denied everything, her voice shaking as she insisted that it was just a friend from work. But I could see the cracks in her facade, the way her gaze darted away from mine. I pressed her, demanding to know the truth, and finally, she broke down, confessing to a flirtation with Jake. The word felt like a dagger to my heart. Flirtation? It was so much more than that. I could feel the betrayal seeping into my bones, poisoning everything I had believed in. I had trusted both of them, and now I was left with nothing but a shattered illusion. In the days that followed, I was a man possessed. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, and every time I closed my eyes, I saw their faces, Emily's sweet smile, Jake's easy laughter. I felt like a ghost in my own life, drifting through the motions while my heart bled. I had to do something, anything, to reclaim my dignity. I couldn't let them get away with this. I began to plot my revenge, a plan that would expose their betrayal in the most public way possible. I wanted everyone to see the truth, to witness the destruction of the perfect image they had created. I envisioned the moment during the ceremony when I would reveal their affair, the gasps of shock from our guests, the look of horror on Emily's face. It would be a moment of catharsis, a way to reclaim my power. As the wedding day approached, I found myself consumed by thoughts of revenge. I spent sleepless nights crafting my plan, rehearsing the words I would say, the look I would give. I wanted to make sure that when the moment came, I would be ready. I would not be the victim, I would be the one in control. But even as I plotted, a part of me mourned the loss of what could have been. I had dreamed of a life with Emily, of building a family and growing old together. Now, all of that felt like a distant memory, a cruel joke played by fate. I was left with nothing but anger and heartbreak, and I knew that the wedding day would be the turning point in my life. As I stood at the altar, I felt the weight of my decision pressing down on me. I was ready to expose the truth, to shatter the illusion of happiness that surrounded us. The calm before the storm was almost unbearable, and I knew that soon, everything would change. The day of the wedding dawned bright and clear, but inside me, a tempest raged. I had spent the night tossing and turning, my mind racing with thoughts of betrayal and revenge. The plan I had meticulously crafted was now etched into my mind, a script I was ready to perform. I could feel the adrenaline coursing through my veins, a mixture of fear and anticipation. This was it, the moment I would confront the truth and reclaim my dignity. As I stood in the back room of the estate, waiting for the ceremony to begin, I could hear the soft murmur of guests outside, their laughter and chatter a stark contrast to the turmoil inside me. I adjusted my tie for the umpteenth time, trying to calm my racing heart. My best man, Jake, was supposed to be my support, but now he felt like a ticking time bomb, a reminder of the betrayal that had shattered my world. I glanced at my reflection in the mirror, taking in the sharp lines of my suit and the way my hair was neatly styled. I looked the part of a groom, but inside, I felt like a stranger in my own skin. The man staring back at me was a facade, a mask I wore to hide the pain and anger that threatened to consume me. I took a deep breath, reminding myself of the plan. I had to stay focused, I had to wait for the right moment. The officiant's voice broke through my thoughts, calling for everyone to take their seats. I could hear the rustle of fabric and the shuffle of feet as our guests settled in. My heart pounded in my chest as I stepped out of the room and into the grand hall, the sight before me both breathtaking and surreal. The aisle was lined with flowers, and the soft glow of candles illuminated the space, creating an atmosphere of romance and joy. But all I could see was the illusion of happiness that surrounded me. As I walked down the aisle, I forced myself to smile, to play the part of the ecstatic groom. Emily stood at the altar, her eyes sparkling with excitement, her smile radiant. She looked beautiful, and for a fleeting moment, I felt a pang of love mixed with sorrow. How could someone so lovely betray me so deeply? But I quickly pushed those thoughts aside, reminding myself of the truth that lay beneath the surface. Jake stood beside her, his expression one of pride and confidence. I could feel the anger bubbling up inside me as I approached them. The moment of revelation was drawing near, and I could almost taste the sweet satisfaction of exposing their betrayal. I took my place at the altar, my heart racing as the officiant began the ceremony. He spoke of love and commitment, of the promises we were about to make. Each word felt like a knife, twisting deeper into my heart. I glanced at Emily, her eyes locked on mine, filled with a mixture of love and anticipation. I wanted to scream, to tell her that everything was a lie, that the vows we were about to exchange were meaningless. But I held back, waiting for the perfect moment to unleash the truth. As the officiant prompted us to exchange vows, I felt a surge of adrenaline. This was it, the moment I had been waiting for. I took a deep breath, my mind racing as I prepared to speak. I had rehearsed my words countless times, but now, as I stood before her, I felt a wave of uncertainty wash over me. Would I really go through with it? Could I bear to see the look of shock on her face? Emily began to speak, her voice trembling with emotion as she recited her vows. I watched her, my heart heavy with conflicting feelings. She spoke of love, of trust, of a future together, and I felt the anger boiling inside me. How could she stand there and say those words when she had betrayed me so completely? When it was my turn, I took a step forward, my heart pounding in my chest. I looked into her eyes, searching for any sign of remorse, any hint of guilt. But all I saw was love, and it made my blood boil. I cleared my throat, my voice steady as I began to speak. Emily, I started, my heart racing. I stand here today, ready to promise you my love and devotion. But before we go any further, there's something you need to know. The words hung in the air, and I could feel the tension in the room shift. Guests exchanged confused glances, their smiles fading as they sensed the change in atmosphere. I took a deep breath, my gaze shifting to Jake, who stood beside her, his expression shifting from confidence to confusion. You've betrayed me, Emily. You've betrayed us both. The words spilled out of me, raw and unfiltered. I know about you and Jake. I know about your affair. Gasps echoed through the hall, and I could see the shock on Emily's face as her eyes widened in disbelief. The color drained from her cheeks, and for a moment, time stood still. I felt a rush of empowerment, a sense of vindication as I watched her process the truth. the facade of happiness shattered, and I reveled in the chaos I had unleashed. Jake's expression shifted from confusion to anger, and I could see the realization dawning on him. He opened his mouth to protest, but I cut him off. You think I didn't notice? The late nights, the secretive texts. You both thought you could keep this from me, but I was watching. I was waiting for the right moment to expose you. The guests were in a frenzy, whispers and murmurs filling the air as they processed what was happening. I could see the shock on their faces, the disbelief that this was unfolding at a wedding. But I didn't care. I had taken back my power, and I was ready to watch the fallout. Emily's eyes filled with tears, and I felt a pang of sorrow mixed with satisfaction. How could you do this to me? I demanded, my voice rising. How could you stand there and pretend to love me while you were betraying me with my best friend? The officiant stood frozen, unsure of how to proceed, and I could see the chaos unfolding around us. Guests were whispering, some looking at Emily with pity, others with shock. I felt a sense of liberation wash over me, a release of the pain I had been holding onto for so long. As I stood there, the weight of the truth finally lifted. I knew that everything had changed. The wedding I had envisioned was gone, replaced by a moment of raw honesty that would forever alter the course of our lives. I had exposed the betrayal, and now, I was ready to face the consequences. The moment hung in the air like a thick fog, heavy with disbelief and shock. I stood at the altar, my heart racing, adrenaline coursing through my veins as I watched the fallout of my revelation unfold. Emily's face was a canvas of emotions, confusion, anger, and finally, despair. Jake's expression shifted from disbelief to fury, his eyes narrowing as he processed the gravity of the situation. The guests, once filled with joy and anticipation, now sat in stunned silence, their faces a mix of shock and sympathy. Get out of my way! Jake finally shouted, his voice breaking the silence. He stepped forward, his fists clenched at his sides. You don't know what you're talking about. The bravado in his voice was a thin veneer, cracking under the weight of the truth. I could see the panic in his eyes, the realization that the perfect image he had crafted was crumbling before him. Don't you dare deny it. I shot back, my voice steady despite the chaos swirling around us. You think I didn't see the way you looked at her? The way you two laughed together? You've been lying to me, and now everyone knows. I gestured to the guests, who were now murmuring amongst themselves, their expressions a mix of shock and pity. Emily's hands trembled as she clutched her bouquet, her eyes darting between Jake and me. This isn't how it was supposed to be, she cried, her voice breaking. We were supposed to be happy. I didn't mean for it to happen like this. The tears streamed down her cheeks, and for a moment, I felt a flicker of sympathy. But it was quickly extinguished by the anger that had fueled my actions. Happy? I scoffed, my voice dripping with sarcasm. You think this is happiness? You think lying to me and betraying my trust is happiness? You've shattered everything we built together. I could feel the heat rising in my chest, the pain of betrayal morphing into a fierce determination. I would not let her manipulate me with tears. I had to stay strong. The officiant, still standing in shock, finally cleared his throat, attempting to regain control of the situation. Perhaps we should take a moment to, he began, but I cut him off. No! I shouted, my voice echoing through the hall. This is the moment. This is the truth that needs to be heard. I turned back to Emily, my heart pounding. You wanted to marry me while you were sleeping with my best friend. How could you think I would just stand here and pretend everything was fine? The guests shifted uncomfortably in their seats, some whispering to one another, others looking down at their hands, unable to meet my gaze. I could feel the weight of their judgment, but I didn't care. I had exposed the truth, and now it was time for them to see the reality of the situation. Emily took a step forward, her voice trembling. I never meant to hurt you, I swear. It just happened. I was confused, and Jake was there for me when you weren't. Her words felt like daggers, each one piercing deeper into my heart. You were so focused on the wedding, on making everything perfect, that I felt alone. Alone? I echoed, incredulous. You think that justifies what you did? You think cheating on me is okay because you felt neglected? You could have talked to me. You could have told me how you felt. My voice rose with each word, fueled by the anger and betrayal that coursed through me. Jake stepped forward, his face flushed with anger. You don't know what you're talking about. You're making a scene, and it's embarrassing. His words dripped with contempt, and I could see the facade of confidence slipping away. This is supposed to be a happy day. Happy? I laughed bitterly, the sound echoing in the silence. You think this is about happiness? You think I care about your embarrassment? You've both betrayed me in the worst way possible, and now everyone knows the truth. I gestured to the guests, who were now fully engaged in the drama unfolding before them. The officiant, realizing he had lost control of the ceremony, stepped back, allowing the chaos to unfold. I could see the shock on the faces of our friends and family, their expressions a mix of disbelief and sympathy. I felt a strange sense of power in that moment, a release of the pain I had been holding onto for so long. Emily's tears flowed freely now, her makeup running down her cheeks. Please, don't do this, she begged, her voice barely above a whisper. I love you. I didn't mean for it to happen. Her words felt hollow, a desperate attempt to salvage what was left of our relationship. Love? I spat, the word tasting bitter on my tongue. You don't get to say that after what you've done. You've destroyed everything we had, and now you want to play the victim? I could feel the anger boiling inside me, a fire that refused to be extinguished. The guests began to murmur, their voices rising as they processed the unfolding drama. I could see the shock on their faces, the disbelief that this was happening at a wedding. But I didn't care. I had taken back my power, and I was ready to face the consequences. As I stood there, the weight of the truth finally lifted. I knew that everything had changed. The wedding I had envisioned was gone, replaced by a moment of raw honesty that would forever alter the course of our lives. I had exposed the betrayal, and now, I was ready to face the aftermath. Get out, I said, my voice low and steady as I turned to Jake. Get out of my life. Both of you. The words hung in the air, a finality that echoed through the hall. I could see the shock on their faces, the realization that everything they had built was crumbling before them. As I stepped back, the weight of my decision settled over me. I had taken a stand, and now I was ready to face whatever came next. The wedding day, meant to be a celebration of love, had become a battleground for my heart, and I was ready to reclaim my life. The silence that followed my declaration was deafening. I could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on me, the eyes of our guests boring into my back as I stood there, heart racing, adrenaline still coursing through my veins. I had just shattered the illusion of a perfect wedding, and now, the reality of betrayal lay bare before everyone. Emily's face twisted in anguish, her tears flowing freely as she struggled to comprehend the gravity of what had just happened. Please, don't do this, she pleaded again, her voice cracking. We can fix this. We can talk about it. But her words felt empty, a desperate attempt to cling to something that had already slipped through her fingers. Jake, on the other hand, was seething. His face flushed with anger, he stepped forward, fists clenched. You're making a huge mistake, man. You don't know what you're doing. His voice was a mix of rage and desperation, but I could see the cracks in his bravado. The facade of confidence he had worn so easily was crumbling, and I reveled in the sight. I know exactly what I'm doing, I shot back, my voice steady. I'm exposing the truth. You both thought you could keep this hidden, that I wouldn't find out. But here we are, and everyone knows what you've done. I gestured to the guests, who were now whispering amongst themselves, their expressions a mix of shock and sympathy. The officiant, still standing awkwardly to the side, finally cleared his throat. Perhaps we should take a moment to, he began, but I cut him off again. No. This is the moment. This is what needs to happen. I felt a surge of power as I spoke, the anger and betrayal fueling my resolve. I had taken control of my narrative, and I wasn't about to let anyone silence me now. Emily's sobs echoed through the hall, and I felt a pang of guilt mixed with my anger. I had loved her once, and seeing her in such pain was almost unbearable. But I reminded myself of the betrayal, the lies that had shattered my trust. I couldn't let her manipulate me with tears. I had to stay strong. "Do you think I wanted this?" she cried, her voice breaking. "I didn't want to hurt you. I was confused, and Jake was there for me when you weren't." Her words felt like a slap in the face, and I could feel the anger boiling inside me again. "Confused?" I echoed, incredulous. "You think that justifies what you did? You think cheating on me is okay because you felt neglected? You could have talked to me. You could have told me how you felt." My voice rose with each word, fueled by the anger and betrayal that coursed through me. Jake stepped forward again, his face flushed with anger. "You're making a scene, and it's embarrassing," he shouted, his voice dripping with contempt. "This is supposed to be a happy day." "Happy?" I laughed bitterly, the sound echoing in the silence. "You think this is about happiness? You think I care about your embarrassment? You've both betrayed me in the worst way possible, and now everyone knows the truth." I gestured to the guests, who were now fully engaged in the drama unfolding before them. The guests began to murmur, their voices rising as they processed the unfolding drama. I could see the shock on their faces, the disbelief that this was happening at a wedding. But I didn't care. I had taken back my power, and I was ready to face the consequences. As the chaos unfolded, I felt a strange sense of liberation wash over me. I had exposed the truth, and now I was ready to watch the fallout. I turned my gaze back to Emily, who was still crying, her makeup running down her cheeks. "You don't get to play the victim here," I said, my voice low and steady. "You made your choices, and now you have to live with the consequences." The officiant, realizing he had lost control of the ceremony, stepped back, allowing the chaos to unfold. I could see the shock on the faces of our friends and family, their expressions a mix of disbelief and sympathy. I felt a strange sense of power in that moment, a release of the pain I had been holding onto for so long. "Get out," I said, my voice low and steady as I turned to Jake. "Get out of my life. Both of you." The words hung in the air, a finality that echoed through the hall. I could see the shock on their faces, the realization that everything they had built was crumbling before them. Jake's face twisted in anger, and he took a step forward, ready to confront me. "You think you can just throw me out like this? You're making a mistake," he shouted, but I stood my ground, unwavering. "No, Jake. You made the mistake when you decided to betray me. You both did." I could feel the weight of my words, the truth of them resonating in the air. I had taken a stand, and now I was ready to face whatever came next. As I stood there, the weight of my decision settled over me. I had taken a stand, and now I was ready to face whatever came next. The wedding day, meant to be a celebration of love, had become a battleground for my heart, and I was ready to reclaim my life. The guests began to rise from their seats, some looking at Emily with pity, others with shock. I could see the whispers spreading like wildfire, the reality of the situation sinking in. I had exposed the truth, and now everyone knew. Emily turned to me, her eyes pleading. "Please, don't do this. We can work it out. I love you." But her words felt hollow, a desperate attempt to salvage what was left of our relationship. "Love?" I spat, the word tasting bitter on my tongue. "You don't get to say that after what you've done. You've destroyed everything we had, and now you want to play the victim?" I could feel the anger boiling inside me, a fire that refused to be extinguished. As the guests began to file out, the atmosphere shifted from shock to sympathy. I could hear the murmurs of disbelief, the whispers of pity. I had taken a stand, and now I was ready to face the consequences. As I stepped back, the weight of my decision settled over me. I had taken a stand, and now I was ready to face whatever came next. The wedding day, meant to be a celebration of love, had become a battleground for my heart, and I was ready to reclaim my life. The aftermath of that fateful day was a whirlwind of emotions, a chaotic blend of relief, anger, and profound sadness. As the last of our guests filed out of the estate, I stood alone at the altar, the remnants of what should have been a joyous occasion swirling around me like confetti in the wind. The flowers, once vibrant and full of life, now felt like a mockery of the love I had thought we shared. Emily had collapsed into a heap of tears, her sobs echoing in the now empty hall. I could see her crumpled form, the wedding dress that had once symbolized our love now a shroud of betrayal. I felt a pang of guilt, but it was quickly overshadowed by the anger that had fueled my actions. I had exposed the truth, and now I was free from the shackles of deceit. Jake had stormed out, his face a mask of fury and disbelief. I could still hear his angry words ringing in my ears, the accusations he hurled at me as he left. "You'll regret this," he had shouted, but I knew deep down that I wouldn't. I had taken back my power, and I was ready to face whatever came next. As I stood there, the silence of the hall enveloping me, I felt a strange sense of liberation wash over me. I had faced the truth, and while it had shattered my world, it had also set me free. I was no longer a victim of their betrayal, I was the one in control of my narrative. The days that followed were a blur of emotions. I moved out of our apartment, leaving behind the memories that had once brought me joy. Each item I packed felt like a weight lifted from my shoulders, a step closer to reclaiming my life. I surrounded myself with friends who supported me, who reminded me that I was worthy of love and respect. They helped me navigate the storm of emotions, offering a shoulder to cry on and a listening ear. Emily reached out several times, her messages filled with apologies and pleas for forgiveness. But I couldn't bring myself to respond. The betrayal was too fresh, the wounds too deep. I needed time to heal, to process the whirlwind of emotions that had consumed me. I had loved her, trusted her, and she had shattered that trust in the most painful way possible. As the weeks turned into months, I began to find solace in the chaos. I threw myself into my work, focusing on my career and rediscovering my passions. I took up new hobbies, explored new places, and slowly began to rebuild my life. I learned to embrace the freedom that came with being single, the ability to make choices without the weight of betrayal hanging over me. But the scars of that day remained. I would often find myself reflecting on the wedding that had turned into a battlefield, the moment when I had taken a stand and reclaimed my power. It was a painful memory, but it was also a reminder of my strength. I had faced the truth, and while it had hurt, it had also set me free. One evening, as I sat on my balcony watching the sunset, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. The vibrant colors painted the sky, a beautiful reminder that even after the darkest storms, there is always light. I realized that I was no longer defined by the betrayal, I was defined by my resilience, my ability to rise from the ashes and rebuild my life. Months later, I received a message from Emily. It was brief, a simple note wishing me well and expressing her hope that I had found happiness. I stared at the screen, my heart heavy with mixed emotions. I had loved her once, but that love had been tainted by betrayal. I took a deep breath and typed a response, not out of anger or resentment, but out of a desire for closure. "Thank you, Emily. I hope you find what you're looking for too." As I hit send, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. I had finally let go of the anger, the pain, and the betrayal. I was ready to move forward, to embrace the future with open arms. The wedding day that had once felt like the end of my world had become a catalyst for my growth, a turning point that had set me on a new path. In the months that followed, I began to date again, cautiously at first. I met new people, shared laughter, and slowly opened my heart to the possibility of love once more. Each connection was a reminder that I was worthy of happiness, that I could find joy again after the darkness. As I stood on the balcony, watching the sun dip below the horizon, I felt a sense of hope. The storm had passed, and I was ready to embrace the beauty of life once more. I had faced betrayal, but I had also discovered my strength. I was no longer defined by the past, I was ready to write a new chapter, one filled with love, laughter, and the promise of a brighter tomorrow. The wedding day had been a turning point, a moment of revelation that had changed everything. But it was also the beginning of a new journey, one that I was ready to embark on with an open heart and a renewed sense of purpose. I had reclaimed my life, and now, I was ready to embrace whatever came next.